Maya is a good friend of mine. She is a sweet and caring mother of 2 young children. She is also a widow and was an illegal immigrant. Please, let's not make this into a diatribe about immigration laws. Okay, that's for another forum. Just sit back and listen to her story, please. She came over here in early 2008 with her husband and 1-year-old daughter and was pregnant with their second. He worked long hours as a field worker, often 60 to 70 hours a week. They'd been in this country maybe half a year when the disaster struck. Her husband died in an automobile crash on the way to work one morning. She did what she had to do. She got a job at a local donut shop and cafe. At first, she was happy because everyone but the owner was an immigrant and she had much in common with her coworker. And the boss told her that she could work many hours, which she really needed. But it quickly became apparent that there was a dark underside to this shop. The owner would only hire illegals. He told them that if they'd work hard for him, he'd take care of them. But if they didn't, he'd call immigration and they'd be deported. Then he told them that they all had to work 48 hours a week, and he didn't believe in overtime. He scheduled them for 6 days a week, regular time, and there were no sick days and no vacation days. She came to me and asked what to do. I informed her that what the boss was doing was illegal, that he was violating Department of Labor regulations, and he was counting on her fear to keep her quiet. And she did one of the bravest things I've ever seen in my life. She made that call to DOL, knowing that she could get fired, knowing that she and her children could get deported. Well, the DOL came down and did an investigation and found that the boss owed his employees over $27,000 for the time in question. The boss reached an agreement that he would pay all his employees back the wages that they were owed by an agreed-upon date. And this is the part that sends him to federal prison. He calls each employee one at a time into his office. He hands them a check for the overtime they are owed. For each employee, it's over $3,300. He tells them to endorse the check because he needs to photocopy it to send to the DOL. They comply. He copies it, and then he leans over and runs it through the shredder. He tells them all that if anyone complains to the feds that they'll all get deported. Now go back to work. And he has the courage to send those copies to labor. Total arrogance on his part, don't you agree? She comes to me crying that she needs that money. What can she do now? Well, folks, this jerk is going down. So, I am the one who drops the dime on Mr. Jerk. The local paper had carried the story when he'd agreed to the restitution, so it was only a matter of a few clicks to find the pertinent information I needed. I called the department's office in our state capital and was transferred to the original investigators. Explained to them what Maya had told me, and her fears if she complained. They were incredulous at his audacity and vowed to look into it. Usually the Fed machine grinds slowly, if at all, but this was too much for the DOL. In just 2 months, a federal grand jury handed down a 10-count indictment for concealment by trick and making false statements to the U.S. Department of Labor and for willful failure to pay overtime to his employees. Stupid boss! It turns out that a conviction for concealment by trick and making false statements carries a maximum penalty of 5 years imprisonment, a $250,000 fine, or both. A conviction for willful failure to pay overtime carries a maximum penalty of 6 months imprisonment, a $10,000 fine, or both. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in the pen. Postscript to this story. Boss went to jail at the end of 2011. Maya and her co-workers stayed on at the Donut Cafe, which was run, fairly I might add, by the boss's wife. No one was deported. I don't know about the others, but Maya became a U.S. citizen in the fall of 2016. She has since remarried, and the kids are doing well in school. She now works as a secretary at a local company, making far more than she ever did slinging donuts. I am very proud of her. It had been 5 months since I left my wife, and my best friend had a falling out with his girlfriend. Unexpectedly, we found ourselves moving into a 1-bedroom basement apartment near downtown, sharing the space to cut down on expenses. Spring of 2007 arrived, and we settled into the small apartment where utilities were conveniently included in the $600 monthly rent. I claimed the bedroom while Joe, my friend, made himself at home in the compact living room kitchenette on the couch. Although a few issues arose, they were manageable and fixable. Carol, the landlord, didn't mind when I took the initiative to lay new cement for the basement steps or fix the leaking awning outside our door. However, our situation took a turn for the worse when fall and winter arrived. Every time it rained, the basement would flood, forcing me to invest in a shop vac to remove the water. When the temperature dropped, the heating ducts proved ineffective and we resorted to using the stove to keep warm. This makeshift solution worked until February of the following year when Carol received her exorbitant electric bill. Since I worked nights, I was asleep when Carol confronted Joe, demanding that we vacate the premises due to the high electricity usage. Joe attempted to explain the dysfunctional heating and our freezing conditions, but Carol remained unmoved. Joe woke me up to relay the news, and I refused to accept her decision. Determined to find a resolution, Joe and I decided to seek help from the Board of Health office at City Hall. That's where we met Jenny, a health inspector, to whom we explained our predicament. Jenny arranged for an investigation, inviting Bill, the fire marshal, and Charles, the building inspector, to assess the situation. 3 days later, Jenny, Bill, and Charles showed up at Carol's door, demanding to inspect the basement. Carol greeted them with anger. As they entered our apartment, they began listing numerous violations, including inadequate heat, unpadded carpet flooring, lack of a second exit, and limited access to fuse panels and circuit breakers. Carol engaged in an argument with Joe, harboring prejudice due to our racial differences. She refused to speak to me as I was white and Joe was Blackfoot, while she identified as Haitian. However, Joe also held a disdain for her. "Why did you call them?" Carol questioned Joe. "I didn't," he replied. "Then who did?" "I did," I interjected. "You had no right to do this. We don't even have a lease." "Oh, really? Then what do you call this?" I produced the agreement we had all signed, highlighting the inclusion of electricity in the rent. Jenny and Charles examined it, confirming that it constituted a tenancy at will agreement. The city ordered Carol to repair and bring the basement up to code as long as we resided there. 2 weeks later, HIVAC contractors arrived to install a separate heating system for the basement. Approximately 4 weeks later, a county sheriff delivered eviction notices for both Joe and me. In Massachusetts, eviction cases typically went through civil court, but tenants' lawyers could have them transferred to housing court, which favored tenants over landlords. We consulted our lawyer, Jim, who believed we could recover our security deposit, but not much more. Joe intended to move in with his new girlfriend, while I planned to take over her old place, conveniently located just around the block from our current residence. In the meantime, while still living at Carol's property, we were not obligated to pay her rent. When the hearing date arrived, we appeared at housing court accompanied by Jim. Carol, accompanied by her lawyer, also attended. We waited quietly on one side of the hall while Jim approached Carol and her attorney. He presented them with a proposal suggesting that she reimburse our security deposit and cover his fees. Carol adamantly refused the offer, prompting Jim to inform her that we would proceed to trial. Returning to us, Jim relayed Carol's response and assured us that he would inform us of the trial date. We agreed and left the courthouse. As we departed, I couldn't help but notice Carol engaged in a heated argument with a meter maid who was writing her a parking ticket. Joe and I erupted in laughter as we drove past her. After Joe and I moved out, Carol eventually settled, refunding our security deposit and paying our lawyer's fees. I received $600 back. However, the inspectors revisited the property and informed Carol that she could no longer rent out the basement. After factoring in all the necessary upgrades, as well as legal fees amounting to $1,100 for both Carol and me, she ended up spending over $7,000. Frustratingly, she put the house on the market, but there were no takers. To this day, it may still be up for sale. Any potential buyers? Huh? I have to share this incident that just happened because it was both amusing and a little petty. It involved my sister's dog, although I did warn her about it beforehand. Last night, we had a snowfall of about 2 to 3 inches. The weather was freezing, and we had to bundle up to avoid getting frostbite in under 10 minutes. Now, My sister's dog is an incredibly energetic and sometimes annoying bundle of fur. One moment she's lazy, and the next moment she's sprinting towards any sound that suggests food or treats. My sister, on the other hand, is very stubborn when it comes to the dog. She claims to care deeply for its health, yet she enables about 80% of its misbehavior. Despite our warnings, she would often secretly give in to the dog's demands, justifying it with excuses like she needed it or she's lonely. It could be quite frustrating at times. Interestingly, the dog absolutely loves the cold weather. It becomes hyperactive and starts running and jumping around like a wild creature whenever it's outside. It's a real challenge to control a rowdy 100-pound puppy like that, and it can be extremely exhausting. This is one of the reasons why I prefer cats. So, after going outside to enjoy the snow, the dog went into a frenzy, jumping and darting around all of us, my mom, my little sister, and me. While my mom and I scolded the dog for its behavior, my little sister, of course, didn't see any problem with it. During one of the dog's erratic moves, I ended up falling and scraping my knee. Fortunately, the snow provided a somewhat softer landing. However, getting back on my feet was harder than dealing with the scraped knee. That's when I came up with an idea and told my sister to hold on to the dog's vest. She usually wears a vest instead of a collar, but sometimes we put both on her. Holding onto the vest's handle would usually calm the dog down. So after the dog's excitement subsided, I grabbed the handle and pulled her inside, and miraculously, she immediately stopped her rowdy actions. My sister initially claimed that she wouldn't be able to hold onto the handle because the dog would be running too fast. But what she was really saying was, I won't do it because it might hurt her and she's a good puppy who will listen. The first couple of attempts went fine, but I could see my sister struggling to control the hyperactive pup. She would even come back inside, visibly annoyed. However, I did notice that the dog stopped in front of her a few times after being told no, presenting an opportunity for my sister to grab the handle. During the next attempt, I reminded my sister to hold onto the handle if the dog got too excited, but she stubbornly refused. Well, can you guess what happened next? Yep, I went to my room to grab my phone, and within a minute, I heard the door opening hastily. I rushed to the door and saw my sister angrily yelling at the dog to come inside. I asked her what happened, and she replied she pulled me down. I noticed some snow on the sleeves of her heavy coat and pants and a little on the side of her hood. Believe me, it took every ounce of self-control not to say, I told you so, or you should have listened to me. But I couldn't help but let a small, sly smile creep onto my face when she wasn't looking. I doubt this incident will change her mind about how to handle the dog, but it was funny to imagine my stubborn sister falling into the snow after allowing the dog to run circles around her. I'm relieved she didn't get hurt like I did, but I hope this serves as a wake-up call for her. She even tried to argue back by saying, I didn't fall, I was pulled down. Well, technically true, but she still fell nonetheless.